Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Power Man podcast. My name's Rory Paquette. You guys all know that. I love saying it though because, just a few years ago, I wasn't sure if this was actually going to become a reality. If we were going to be doing this podcast, there were plenty of times when people threatened me to get it off the air. Folks, I'm telling you, we're still sitting here. Almost 6 years later, killing it like this and having you wonderful people listening to our show. It's a dream come true for me. And I just want to make sure that I'm saying thank you and letting you all know how grateful I am. With every step, with every word, with every minute that we're on here, it's all for you folks. Thank you for everything you've done. As we get rolling, you guys all know what time it is. I got to pay a couple of bills. So here comes our coffee sponsor of the day. Here comes me taking a sip of my preferred beverage. Ooh, man, super hot. My wife just made me a new cup of that. It's absolutely fantastic. You guys all know what we're drinking. That's right. It's Freedom Hill Coffee. At Freedom Hill Coffee on Instagram, folks, check them out. Look them up. Go see what they have to offer. Deep, dark, rich, bold, and beautiful. Just like my wife. Their coffee is fantastic. They brew a mean bean. It's a fantastic cup of joe. And I'm telling you right now, they do all the right things for all the right reasons, and they support veterans, which you all know is incredibly important to us here at Power Man and to this gentleman we have on today. We support veterans here. We love all of you. And so do they. So Freedom Hill Coffee, folks. Go check them out at Freedom Hill Coffee on Instagram. Tell them Power Man sent you. Let me get one more sip of this so I can keep up with this guy who's sitting across the table from me. All right, there we go. Man, good stuff. Folks, we have an incredible guest with us today, and I have really been looking forward to talking to this gentleman. Please welcome to the program Navy veteran, author, father of six, grandfather to five. His list of accomplishments is longer than my arm, but I thought those were kind of some of the big ones. Folks, please welcome to the program Jerry Werner. Jerry, how you doing, sir?
Good. Thank you, Rory. Thank you very much for inviting me.
I
And
appreciate you
thanks,
being here.
thanks for your support of veterans. We really, really appreciate it.
100%. 100%. You got it, sir. I'll tell you what, you have so much that you can bring to the program today. I'm not even sure where to start. I'm going to go ahead and just throw it to you, and I'm going to say, sir, let everybody know who is Jerry Werner. What are you about, and what brings you here today?
Okay. Well, I've been a lot of things throughout my life. Currently, I'm an author. So part of what I wanted to do was to introduce your audience to my book, Grandpa's Adventures in the U.S. Navy, Soul Searching on the Way to Mars. It's an autobiography that takes a look at a 20-year slice of my life. It starts when I was 13 and ends when I was 33. And during that time, I was on astronaut track. And I went from a kid in a cornfield to the doorsteps of NASA. But before I joined the astronaut program, I was given an assignment that was ethically questionable. And I had to go through a great deal of pain to decide what to do at that point. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I was born in Western Wisconsin, the oldest of seven children. My father, when I was 1 year old, bought a one-room country schoolhouse built during the Civil War and on 2 acres. And we had no running water until I was 10 years old. So pretty humble beginnings.
Wow.
When I was 13 years old, the space race with the Soviet Union was going. And Alan Shepard had just launched into space. I said, no, that is really cool. If there's something that excites me as a kid, becoming an astronaut would be it. But I didn't know, obviously I didn't know any astronauts, I didn't know any pilots. I didn't even have any college graduates in my family tree. So the Mercury astronauts published a book that year called We Seven, and it described how they became astronauts. So from that, I took notes and created my own astronaut track, which included going to one of the service academies first, Naval Academy or Air Force Academy. Second was getting a master's degree in a technical subject like aeronautics. Third was becoming a fighter pilot, not just a fighter pilot, but a distinguished fighter pilot so that they could qualify to get into test pilot school. So the final step was to become a graduate of the test pilot school. I spent 20 years on astronaut track and a lot of missteps along the way. As a matter of fact, there were 16 times where I reached a point where I had to proceed to the next step and failed to do so. But ultimately, I succeeded. And the book really is a story about persistence. And when we read stories, autobiographies of famous people, we find that all of them had setbacks along the way. They all had to overcome adversity. There's no easy jump from step A to step Z to become successful, to become the best of the best. You've got to have endurance, you've got to have persistence. And these days with social media, we pay so much attention to the quickest, fastest, prettiest. But in the end, those who are really successful in their field, any field, become the top slice of that field. It takes a lot of work. And they definitely will face setbacks along the way, as everybody does. Now, why did I write the book? The hint is in the title, Grandpa's Adventures. I told these stories to my kids over the years, 100 stories. And they were so fascinated by them, they said, you've got to save them for posterity, save them for our children, your grandkids. So I started writing the book 2 years ago. And I shared each chapter as it was done with friends and family. And turns out there's a lot of interest beyond just the grandchildren. And sometimes friends and family can be the toughest audience, but they gave me glowing reports back from what I'd written. And they helped me improve it. But it turns out they were right. A lot more people than my grandchildren have enjoyed the book. It's already sold thousands of copies.
That's fantastic. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. I co-developed a promotional piece with my publisher, Amazon. I'd like to read it to you and your audience. It just takes a minute.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, please do.
Grandpa's Adventures in the U.S. Navy, soul searching on the way to Mars. If you like stories of high adventure where life and death hang in the balance, you've come to the right place. I should have been dead more than a dozen times. If you want to know what it's like to be on astronaut track and how to go from obscurity to NASA's doorstep, this book will give you some clues. You'll feel what it's like to be a plebe at the U.S. Naval Academy. You'll be riding along with me as we take a spin in the world's fastest fighter jet. We'll not only break the sound barrier together, we'll go more than 2 times the speed of sound and almost die doing it. You learn what it's like to get shot out of a cannon, that is an aircraft carrier catapult. We'll survive a Category 5 hurricane together on a U.S. Navy destroyer in the Pacific. You'll share a cell with me in prisoner of war camp. We'll experience the joy of swimming in a coffin filled with garbage. Yuck. We'll share 5 weeks of adventure together at the real Top Gun, the fighter weapons school in San Diego. We'll meet the Soviet defector who stole the MiG-25. And there'll still be time left over for humor, ghosts, and romance. So the book is available at Amazon, of course, my publisher. It's also available at Barnes & Noble, where in the select stores that it's in, it's been among the best sellers for new authors. But the best place to get it is my website, jerrywerner.com, which we'll repeat again before the show is over.
Of course. And we'll have all that in the show notes too. No problem. I'll make sure all those links are in there for everybody.
Excellent.
Yeah. Now, you just read off a whole bunch of stuff, a whole lot of things that you've gone through in your life. I could pick through any one of those and ask you about them, but I'm curious, when you read that list, sir, is there any one of those things that stands out to you and you go, yeah, I remember that. Yeah, that was all right. Anything that really just sort of trips your trigger when you read your own list of all those fantastic accomplishments?
Well, certainly every one of them triggers a memory of some kind.
Right.
And what I've learned from writing the book, and I think probably you and most people know, is the more emotion attached to an event, the more likely it is we'll remember it in detail.
Yeah.
The boring stuff we don't remember. And you asked me about, when we talked earlier, about prisoner of war camp. Well, it was training only, but boy, it was realistic. This is the training that all personnel go through who might end up in a war zone. And a reminder to me of why we say thank you for your service to those who have served and serve today is we promise as members of the military to give our lives for others if we have to. And lives are on the line at all times. The training we went through, the trainers, this is called SEER School, Survival, Evasion, Escape, and Rescue, SEER School. The only rule was they could cause no broken bones or leave any physical scars. But we were treated as roughly as could be, except we knew that those who were handling us were Americans, even though they didn't act like it, and that eventually that we wouldn't die, but we were tortured just the same. And I told you one of the things they did to torture me, because I was one of the senior leaders in the school. I refused to give them their silly salute. This was day one. And they insisted on my saluting them by having a fist to the chest. And I refused to salute them. I did an American salute. And they finally beat me up, stripped me, and threw me out in a snowbank. And it reminded me of a Navy expression, cold enough to freeze the balls off a brass monkey. Ever heard that one before?
I haven't heard it like that, no. It sure is
Well,
vivid.
I was that monkey. So when I got back in where it was dry and warm again, I gave them their salute. So one of the early things I learned was you got to pick your battles. And they would torture, a real prisoner of war camp, torture people to get information about the ship they came from, or the airplanes they flew, or any technical information. And in real prisoner of war camp, they'll take as much beatings as much as they can and give as little as possible. But what we learn from it is that everybody has a breaking point. You're not expected to be perfect. So that's one thing I remember very well is the whole prisoner of war experience.
Wow.
Of course, I remember other things that were more fun.
I hope so. My goodness. I can't even imagine going through that. But even as going through that, I think the biggest point about that you brought up was no matter how bad it got, you knew in your heart that they weren't going to actually kill you. And
Right.
you knew that it would end at some point. And the real prisoners of war, they don't get either one of those things. They're constantly
Yeah,
worried about both.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Very, very difficult situation.
Yeah.
It made me think about people who are not prisoners of war, but just plain prisoners, to have all your rights taken away.
Hmm. Yeah. Rough. Okay, yeah, let's talk about something a little happier than that in terms of your memory.
Yes.
So, Top Gun was something that sounded really, really cool when you were telling me about it. For obvious reasons, everybody's kind of heard of that through the movies and whatnot. But what was your experience like there?
Oh, that was awesome. And I was very fortunate to have gotten a chance to go to Top Gun. The Navy advertises that only 1% of their pilots end up going to Top Gun. And the first Top Gun movie in 1986 made it look like it was a macho, the macho, who's going to win the Top Gun trophy. There is no Top Gun trophy. The trophy is to be invited back to be an instructor. But the real program, Top Gun, then and now, is a train the trainer program. And you're chosen not just because you're a good pilot, but the perception that you can teach others when you come back, act as a role model to the other pilots, some of whom are even senior to you, but to teach them more effective tactics, more effective ways of dogfighting, for example. That was the most exciting 7 weeks of my life. My very first dog fight with a Top Gun instructor, and they're the best. Top Gun instructor, he kicked my ass. And he was in an F5 Tiger, and I was an F4 Phantom. He said, "You'll never beat me getting into a horizontal turning fight. I'll turn inside you every time and hose you down." He said, "The only advantage the F4 Phantom has is its ability to climb, to get out of the fight. And nobody can catch them if you do it right." He said, "I knew one pilot who could do a vertical reversal in an F4 Phantom, but I have no clue how he did it. But he could beat everybody because of that." So instead of going to happy hour 3 days in a row, I went with my buddy, Larry Vert Neal, my back seat. And we determined we were going to figure out how do you do a vertical reversal in the F4 Phantom. And the first time up, I couldn't get it in the vertical. I figured out how to do that. Then trying to figure out when to start the reversal. You can't wait until you're down to zero airspeed, because the airplane falls like a maple leaf bouncing around before it gets going again. You've lost the fight then, or you've lost sight of your enemy. But I finally figured out how to do the vertical reversal and what speed to do it at. And once we figured that out, nobody could touch us. So going back to the squadron, I taught as many as who were willing to learn how to do the vertical reversal. And it turned out to be one of the reasons why I was number one at Top Gun, was invited back to be an instructor, and helped elevate me to become Fighter Pilot of the Year.
Wow.
So that was fun. That was exciting.
Wow, that just sounds amazing. I feel like I'm watching the movie of it right now, while you're describing it. It sounds fantastic.
Adding to that, 3 production houses have approached me to make the book into a movie. So we're considering that now.
Really? Good
Yes.
for you. Oh my goodness. Well, I hope that happens. I would
Yeah.
absolutely love to be able to go see that movie. That'd be fantastic.
I'd love to have you in the audience.
Yeah. What is there something holding you back from pulling the trigger on that? Are you worried about how it would be portrayed or something? Or I'm just curious.
Well, the key player in this is my ex-wife.
Hmm.
She was my partner and co-conspirator, so to speak, throughout this story. So reconnecting with her, and it appears as if she's willing to do it. The next thing is that the production houses will split costs to reduce their risk. So they want me to pay half of it. So half is $12,000. So I've got over $60,000 invested in the book already. So I'm looking for some returns on that investment.
Wow.
So that's what's delaying it a bit. Relationship with a key player of the movie and the money.
Of course. My goodness. Yeah, I didn't realize they did a split like that when they tried to put something together, but no one's ever approached me about making a movie. So that's gonna be interesting when it comes out. It sounds like it's gonna happen then.
I believe so.
Beautiful. All right. Well, I hope you'll keep us posted, and when it does, I'd love to have you back on here talking about the premiere of the movie for your book. I hope you'll come back.
That's a deal, Rory.
All right. Good deal. Good deal. Looking forward to that. As you talk about some of this other stuff, you traveled at 2 times the speed of sound?
Yes.
I mean, on purpose, or did you just happen to figure that out while instead of going to happy hour again?
Well, military people don't get paid a lot, but we get rewards and ribbons to wear and medals to wear and so forth, and sometimes buttons to wear. One of the buttons that I earned while I was still a student was the Mach 1 button, the speed of sound, which I could wear on, not on my regular uniform, but my flight suit and other places. But there was also a Mach 2 pin. And so I decided I wanted a Mach 2 pin. And while I was still at Fighter Squadron, where I had an airplane that could go that fast, I had to wait for a day when the centerline fuel tank was not attached, because you're limited to Mach 1.6 with a centerline fuel tank in the F4 Phantom. Without the fuel tank there, you can get up to Mach 2. So I flew up to 40,000 feet, and I started a series of what's called camels, like camel, you think of camel humps, of descending and climbing in full afterburner until I was able to zoom up to above 50,000 feet, then just nose down, full afterburner to get the speed up. And it was when you fly supersonic every day in a jet, it's ho hum, boring. But I guarantee as I was getting up around 1,500 miles per hour, it was not boring. And the clouds were flying by, puffy clouds.
Wow.
And I got up to Mach 2.0, 2.1, 2.2, and it's supposed to be good to 2.2, 2.02. But somewhere around 2.03 or 4, all of a sudden, one engine quit on me. Boom. And I went into a side skid at 1,500 miles an hour. And I pulled the power back in the good engine immediately. And that had caused a tremendous deceleration, threw me forward in my harness. And if any dirt, dust bunnies, pencils, paper scraps, anything that was in the cockpit went flying up onto the dash in front of me. And my backseater says, "What the hell is that?" I said, "Well, the starboard engine flamed out. And it means that the shock wave got down into the compressor and snuffed out the engine. Didn't cause any permanent damage. F4 Phantom was a tough airplane,
Wow.
but Rory, I didn't ever do that again."
I'm just, I'm sitting here like, what do you do? I mean, I'm just doing Mach 2 and poof, the engine's out. You can't just pull over. I mean,
Can't just love it.
what in the world? That I mean, that had to be terrifying.
And for a moment, my life flashed before my eyes. I really did think this is the end of it.
Yeah.
But the General Electric engines and F4 Phantom, really a tough combination. So what happened was the jet has programmable ramps right at the inlet where the air comes into the engines. And if they program and change the geometry properly, it keeps the shock wave from going down into the engine. But if the shock wave gets sucked into the engine, it cuts off the airflow altogether and flames out. So it was a 30-year-old airplane, so I was taking a risk on whether or not it was to hold together at that speed.
I mean, there are 30-year-old people I wouldn't trust to take me from here to the grocery store. You're in a 30-year-old plane. My goodness. So you really, is it a thrill-seeking thing, or you just don't have that gene that produces fear? Or, I mean, what leads to this sort of, I don't want to say crazy, but kind of crazy behavior?
I think what we want in someone who's a fighter pilot is a fearlessness,
Well,
but calculated in a way that is not too risky. So I was always weighing the risk. I flew airplanes that other guys wouldn't fly, hence I got more flight time than anybody else. I had more flight time than any other fighter pilot in the Navy in 1978. But if it was a minor hydraulic leak on something, and all I had to do is just wipe it up. So I made sure that I would take an airplane and it wasn't perfect. If I waited for a perfect airplane, I wouldn't be flying.
wow.
But you can't take one that has an engine problem or any serious issues.
Yeah.
But Rory, I was lucky. 31 of my friends were not so lucky. In 10 years of flying, 31 of my friends were killed in aircraft accidents. And not because they did necessarily anything too foolish or careful. It just was a very, very risky business. In the book, Tom Wolfe's book, The Right Stuff, he said studies showed that you get a 23% chance of dying if you stayed in the Navy as an aviator for 20 years. So 1 out of every 5 were dead. And that didn't count combat. Combat wasn't considered accidental. So
Wow.
the death rate was pretty damn high.
Man. If I may ask you about one more of these, is that okay?
Absolutely, ask anything.
Okay, appreciate it. When I was reading over this, I was really fascinated with the idea that about the Soviet director who stole the MiG. 25. This is, I mean, because that's a whole different sort of, you were involved in that. How?
I was in VF 102, the Diamondbacks, and my job at the time was uh, special technology, which was a top secret way of saying it. That it was my job to understand, get access to everything we knew about the enemy, their airplanes and their tactics, everything related to fighter pilots for the mission we might have against them as enemies. So I was lucky enough to be able to meet with the man who stole the MiG 25. And only a handful of us got to meet with him. So I tell that story in the book.
Nice.
And one of the terms we used among fighter pilots at that time was if something was really great, really cool, it was called shit hot. So one of the first things he said was that he thought it was shit hot that he got a chance to meet all of us. Oh. And
That's excellent.
he told a story of going to a grocery store and thinking it was like the Soviet Union, where they would stock one grocery store for visitors to make it look like they had abundance. And so he thought that's what he was being shown. And once he lived long enough and he was trusted to go in his car by himself to go shopping, he said, all your stores are that way. You're amazing. Do you appreciate, as Americans, what abundance you really have? And that stuck with me.
Wow. We don't.
No.
I'm sure. That's pretty, yeah, that's pretty obvious. Um, all right. So, I mean, you took
So,
all of these experiences and you turned it into an independent contractor type of thing. You became a consultant. Is that what happened?
well, when I left the Navy, and the last couple of chapters describe what what I went through.
Hmm.
When I left the Navy, I decided the key driver of war appeared to be, in at that time, 1981. The key driver of war was our dependence on foreign oil,
Hmm.
and a big mission for the U.S. Navy was then and still is to keep the channels of commerce open on the high seas. And so I looked for a job which would reduce our dependency on foreign oil and foreign gas, and really to reduce our dependency entirely. So I got into energy conservation paid for by utility companies,
Uh,
and I went up the ranks and had 250 people working for me who helped homeowners make their homes more efficient, and businesses that replaced their lighting with things like incandescent and fluorescent to more efficient.
Interesting.
Then I
Okay.
got recruited by the electric company, and they put me in charge of their energy conservation programs as well as all of customer service. So I was responsible for 500 people, including 125 union workers.
Hmm.
And I enjoyed that, but it was very stressful. And I decided I wanted to become a consultant, help people improve their efficiency, not just energy efficiency, but efficiency of businesses.
Wow.
So I became an independent consultant, hired people, and found that although I was a good leader and I enjoyed it, working as an independent, I could make as much money with a lot fewer headaches.
That's a nice combination right there.
Yes.
More money, less stress. I think we'd all
Yeah.
like a job like that. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, good for you. You certainly earned that, with everything you've done here. So, I love the stories. You decided to put all these into the book for your grandkids so that your
Yes.
grandkids would be able to hear all these and read all these to their kids and so on. Is it, like legacy?
Exactly. That's what I was hoping for. And my grandkids, oldest is 9, the youngest is just a few months old. They aren't big enough yet to read the book, but I have a note at the end of every chapter, lessons learned, so to speak, that I pass on Grandpa's wisdom for the grandkids.
Really? I didn't realize that. Okay. I haven't had a chance to read the book yet, full disclosure. I absolutely plan on it. I'll let you know when I do because I cannot wait to hear the rest of these stories. But you wrote it that way. So, can you give us an example of what one of those lessons might have been, off of one of the stories?
Yeah,
Just
here's an embarrassing one.
okay.
I took off with my wingman. I thought he took off after me. And I go out to, this is a Virginia Beach, NAS Oceana. And there's a path we need to follow during nice weather, visual flight rules. And 15,000 feet over a certain spot on the ground is where this traffic flows through. So I got there and I decided I'm going to do a 360-degree turn, and so that our wingmen can catch up with us, we'll rendezvous together and go out over the ocean, the operating area.
Mhm.
What made me think that was a good idea? I have no clue. Not only was it a bad idea, it almost got us killed.
Oh,
As I was listening to the radio traffic, and I did not hear any other airplanes, and I didn't see any on the ground at Oceana, just my wingman and me. Turns out he had a mechanical problem, went down. We were in different frequencies, so I didn't know it. But an A6 intruder that I was unaware of was fairly close behind us. So as I did the 360-degree turn, I made him head on, a closure rate of 1,000 miles an hour. And we came so close, I could see the whites of their eyes through their tinted visor. We came so close that the air burst between the two of us, flipped both airplanes.
wow.
I scared the shit out of me.
I would imagine. I mean, you've been doing an awful lot of that at high speeds.
Yeah. When
Wow.
it was so close when I got back on the ground. I actually walked around to my starboard wingtip, take a look if I could see any paint from the other airplane. That's how freaking close we came. That's a definition of a near miss for Jerry Werner.
Yeah. So that
And
near
so the note
miss.
to the grandchildren is: do not do a 360 in the middle of a busy highway.
It's actually very deep and very applicable. I see. All right. Do not do a 360 in the middle of a busy highway. That's perfect. Okay. All right. So at the end of every chapter, there's a note like that to your grandkids. That's a
Yes,
moral of the story or a piece of advice based on what
yes,
you wrote. That's great.
yes,
That's wonderful. Obviously, it's picking up interest with people who are not your grandkids because you're selling a ton on Amazon, which is great.
yes.
Yeah. So congratulations on that. But what was the process like for you writing a book? Is this the first book you ever wrote, or have you
The
attempted
first,
this
it's the
before?
first book. Yeah, it's the first book I've ever written, but I wrote short stories before and shared those, but not a whole book.
Hmm.
It took me 3 years. 2 years I was still working full time at 72, 73 years old. So I made outlines, captured a couple of stories, had some feedback from those involved with it. But once I retired from consulting, I spent a full year, 6 hours a day working on writing the book. Ended up with 800 pages. Well, it's big print, 800 pages. Lots of pictures, not to sound intimidating, but it's too much for Amazon to squeeze into one book. So we made volume one and volume two. So it's all one story,
Ah,
but it comes in two volumes. And I
interesting.
was terribly naive, still am. This is a new experience for me. I knew that about self-publishing, and Amazon had a pretty good deal for $3,500. You get your first book out, but they also have upselling you all the time with other stuff. And I was so naive that I thought Barnes and Noble or some bookstore like that would buy some of my books. No, you pay for the books, you pay for the publishing, you pay for the shipping, give it to them, and they'll sell it and they'll give you money every month or every quarter as it sells. Now, if it's successful, they give you an additional contract offering to buy the book from you that go unsold. So Barnes and Noble was buying 4,700 copies of the book, and Ingram Spark, another publisher, offered to buy 2,000 copies. Now, I have to print the 2,000 copies first, give them to them. 12 months later, any that are unsold, they buy. So it's guaranteed to sell. In my
Hmm.
case, 2,000 books.
That's an interesting setup. I don't think I've ever heard of that kind of hybrid plan where you're in self-publishing and you're in the print on demand thing that Amazon has, but then you also have to come up with a certain number of books that you pay for ahead of time. That's
Well,
um,
print on demand is different in that yes, Amazon prints my book, but I only get paid $2.07 for a $27 book.
mm, wow, that's rough.
But Barnes and Noble and Ingram Spark, which mostly are distributing in bookstores, uh, there I have to pay for the book to be published, printed. I shouldn't say published.
Yeah.
The printed copies and delivery to them, and then I get paid a year later. They purchase any that weren't sold.
Hmm. A year later, you have to wait for that to come back. Goodness gracious. I didn't
Well,
realize that either.
they're supposed to pay monthly as you go.
Okay. All right. Wow. Okay, so that's been a learning process for you, obviously going through that and learning how to do it. And now they're talking about a movie with you. So it sounds like it was worth it. What sort of feedback have you gotten? I wonder what did the grandkids have to say about the book and, your kids and that sort of thing.
Well, my grandkids are too small, and the oldest one, 9-year-old, his dad does not want him to read the book because of the romance part of it.
Oh, okay. So you got a little
Some
spicy
some
in
of the
this book, did
lessons,
you?
some of the lessons learned for the grandchildren is be respectful of sexual relations at an early age. There was one thing I could not afford to do is get somebody pregnant. I'd have been at the Naval Academy, as you know, you cannot be married, and you have a 4-year obligation after college as well. Of course, you can get married after college,
Hmm.
but if I'd gotten somebody pregnant anywhere along that route, it would have been the end of the line, end of my career. So that's one of the lessons learned.
Hmm.
The feedback I've gotten from friends and family, uh, and roughly 30 endorsements, 5-star ratings, it's been really, really positive. So I'm grateful for that.
Sure. I would imagine so. That's fantastic. So I get why you did the book. I think that's fantastic that it's flying off the shelf. You've got fantastic stories in there. You and I have had a couple of conversations about, um, things you've learned along the way, how that applies to, kind of the power of man principles and whatnot. Because in addition to being, a Navy veteran and an author and everything else, you're a father to 6 kids and you're a grandfather to five. um, I'm curious how all of this has helped you, be a better father, be a better grandfather.
Well, I'd say my life's experiences have helped me be a better father and grandfather. Regarding the book, where the main lesson or main point I want to bring across is the need for persistence and sticking with your goals and dreams. But
Okay.
fatherhood, for those listening who had children that are some stage of being a parent, I didn't think about it when I was younger that parenting never ends. There's a concern for each one of your children that they are happy and healthy and hopefully become wealthy. Um, and there's a concern to help guide them along the way, not to give them unsolicited advice, but certainly be available to give advice when it's requested.
Hmm. Okay. Excellent. Um, 6 kids. Are they close in age?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
The first three are my biological children. from the first marriage. And the second three are from my second marriage. But
Okay.
I've been together with them. I've been their father figure for 22 years. And at one time, we had all six of them in college.
I wouldn't wish that on
Unfortunately,
anybody. Yeah.
and we had 4 or 5 teenagers simultaneously, two at the same time. That's how close they are in age.
Nice.
But my wife, Arlene, is really good with investments and savings, and she made a good income herself. So between the two of us, and the kids are all smart and got some assistance along the way and some scholarships.
Great. That's great. What was that like, going and having these adventures, and having a career, doing these sorts of things when you're putting a family together back home?
Well, the career and stories we discussed that are part of the book um, ended in when I was 33 years old, and my first son was born at that time. So all the rest of the children and experience of raising them came after the Navy.
I see. Okay. So you never had to bridge that gap. That's actually good. So,
Yeah.
6 kids, that's fantastic. 5 grandkids. What's it been like for you? I mean, you've had all these other thrills in your life. You've been, Mach 2, Top Gun. How does all that compare to being a grandfather?
Well, first I want to say about how it compares to being a father. Um, all the thrills and chills and spills of flying fast airplanes and so forth. I realized that the day that my first child was born and held him in my arms, I felt the experience of joy for the first time in my life. And I feel that same joy repeated with each of the children born and each of my grandchildren. Now, my first grandchild, when he was born, I surprised myself that in holding him, what crossed my mind was this baby boy will probably still be alive at the turn of the next century. And what kind of world will be left for him? So,
Wow, that's a rough thing to think. I know you've lived a lot of life, what does that look like to you?
well, if we just look at climate change alone, it's hard to say where it's headed.
Hmm.
Of course, the flip side of climate change, which is going from cold to hot, it could be worse. We could be going from hot to cold and facing another ice age coming along.
Sure.
But I'm hoping through human ingenuity that we'll find ways to survive and thrive in a new world that's much warmer than it is now.
For sure. For sure. How did, all of the principles that you learned in the Navy, all those years, doing all these different things, how did that help you with raising your kids?
Keeps me chill.
Keeps you chill. All right. It keeps me chill. How so?
Everybody who knows me says that it's pretty hard. I'm unflappable. That if an emergency comes up, I stay cool and calm and figure out a way to solve it, and try to teach my children as well that no matter how bad things look, there's going to be a way to get around it. We'll get through it another day. But so all of them are pretty calm too in the face of emergencies.
That's a huge asset, especially
Yeah.
in today's world. So
Yes.
that's good. You can bring that to them. I love all of this stuff. The stories that we didn't talk about. You mentioned quickly, if I can go back just for a second, you mentioned shot out of a cannon. And that was the experience of having your fighter launched off of an aircraft carrier, right?
Right.
Maybe you can explain to everybody kind of how that works.
I have a short short story to read. It's about getting launched off a carrier,
Okay.
and then I'll back up and describe it more if it needed. So if you don't mind, I'll read from you an excerpt from the book.
Sure.
If I wasn't flying on Sunday mornings at sea, I would usually attend Catholic Mass. So when the Catholic chaplain, Father Kelly, wanted to go flying in an F-4 Phantom, I was an easy choice to be his pilot. The priest had to go through all the same requirements as any other Navy person. By the way, if you were active duty at that time and there was an open seat in a Navy airplane, you went through the qualifications to get it, anybody could go flying.
Hmm.
I used to ask my wife why she didn't go flying with me, and she says, because I've heard all his stories. Anyway, the priest had to go through aviation physiology, in-flight emergency procedures, ejection seat training, cockpit familiarization, communication coordination, and safety briefings. It's February 25th, 1978. We were the first air wing to conduct flight operations on the newest aircraft carrier, the first billion-dollar boat, the USS Eisenhower, CB-69. It was our second month of operations. I was flying the Diamondbacks F-4J Phantom tail number 153900. I briefed Father Kelly about the flight in the ready room, and then led him up to the flight deck where the plane captain strapped him into the back seat. He was wearing a mask. We made sure that his microphone was on or hot at all times. And it was for safety reasons, so I could hear how he was doing. And he didn't have to fumble around to try to find any switches to talk to me. Went through all the pre-launch procedures and powered up my F-4 Phantom on the starboard catapult. The aircraft was shaking in full roaring afterburner. I saluted the catapult officer. He touched the deck. The man in the catwalk pushed the big button, and boom, like a cannon shot, we raced from 0 to 207 miles an hour in 2 seconds. The acceleration took his breath away, smashed the oxygen mask against his face, and blurred his vision with eyeballs in G-force. Father Kelly yelled, "Jesus!" I wasn't surprised. I stayed at low altitude. I stayed in full afterburner about 100 feet above the sea, cleaned up the airplane that has retracted the gear and flaps, accelerated to 700 miles an hour, and pulled the pole back into my lap. The airplane shot up straight through 20,000 feet in about 20 seconds. And Father Kelly screamed, "Holy shit!" That did surprise me. I flew the rest of the mission in a more gentle manner. I did not want to make the man sick. After we returned to the carrier deck, doing a arrested landing, as violent as it was, he was silent until we were completely stopped. And then he said, "Amen." And like a good parishioner, I said, "Amen."
Nice.
In order to get going fast enough on a carrier deck, back in the early days, World War II, airplanes could, with the speed of the deck and the wind over the deck and their acceleration ability, they just power up to full power, zoom, and take off. But the heavier and bigger airplanes got and jets couldn't do that, so they had to come up with a catapult, a means to accelerate them from 0 to hundreds of miles an hour so that they could fly off. And it's really an extreme feeling. The eyeballs in G blurs your vision. And of course, if your head isn't back against the headrest, it'll slam your head back.
Hmm.
So the first time I went through it, I thought of getting shot out of a cannon. I also said, "Jesus, Jesus." They do this to human beings on a regular basis? What the hell is this?
My goodness. So everything's a story then. All of these different points are a short story that you've put into this book together. Every single one of them.
Yeah.
I love that.
There were a few guys who said getting launched on a catapult shot was as good as sex. And I said to them, "You're hanging out with the wrong women."
There you go. There you go. As soon as you said that, I'm like, oh boy, what's coming? That was great. Oh, I love this. I love that you put all this down for your kids and your grandkids, and they're going to be able to read this, for many, many, many years to come. They're going to be able to pass it on to their kids. Do you feel like this sort of secures your legacy with them, with your family line?
I don't think it secures the legacy entirely. I've been asked to do volume three, and volume three gets into subjects that I promised in the first book that I would address. One of those is leadership,
Hmm.
lessons learned in the Navy from leadership. And they would be counter to much of the political leadership we see these days, which we'll not get into. But also ESP, extrasensory perception, remote viewing, ghosts, so forth. I've been asked to elaborate on that, my experience with ghosts, for example.
Wow. Okay. That kind of came out of left field. You have experience with ghosts?
Well, I got visited by a couple of ghosts in the book.
I see. Okay. In the book that's out now, this book you're talking about, not the next one.
Yes.
Wow.
It is described an automobile accident where the young lady in the passenger seat of the car was killed. And her ghost came to visit me and my girlfriend and the guy who was driving the car. She visited us, three of us, the same night.
Hmm. How were you linked to the car then?
I was a passenger in the back seat
I see.
and wasn't
Wow.
wearing a seatbelt. The car over 60 miles an hour run into a rolling, miss a
You've
dog. The driver wanted to miss a dog that was crossing the highway and ended up flipping the car end over end.
you've had a tremendous amount of good fortune in your life.
Yes, I have, I guess.
Yeah.
And then that comes through in the book too. I just apparently wasn't meant to die because I did some dumb things like the 360 in the middle of the highway.
I mean, that's a powerful thing to say. I guess I wasn't meant to die. That is a very powerful thing to say, my friend. I love that that's how you feel about things and about your life. That's magnificent. Yeah,
Yes,
good deal. Good deal. So, are we expecting a volume three, or are you just teasing this on the podcast
just teasing
today?
it.
Okay, nothing in the works yet, then, right?
No, it's working around in my brain, but
Got it. All
it's,
right.
it's not on paper yet.
It's in pre-production. I got you.
If we go ahead with the movie idea, it calls for a screenplay. That's what the $12,000 split cost.
Hmm.
A screenplay, obviously, I've never done one before, and this is first time experience is all this for me. But it looks like as much work as writing a book.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's definitely not something easy to do. I've talked to people who have written screenplays and who do it for a living, and it's very intense,
yeah,
very intense. But you're going to get to learn about that too, hopefully,
I
when all
will.
this comes to fruition. That's fantastic.
Learning
Um,
new things at an old age. I'm 77 years old, so
well, since we aren't
still
necessarily,
learning.
go ahead. What's that?
I just said still learning at
Still
77.
learning. That's great. Since we don't have a volume three in progress just yet, I'd love to tap into that, as we kind of start to wrap things up here a little bit. Your thoughts on leadership. One of the things that we talk about here a lot on this podcast is how men, need to protect, provide for, and lead their families. Do you have a couple thoughts on leadership you want to share with us?
One of them up front is honesty, and I don't see a lot of good role models in the news. Let's just say,
Yeah.
um, and so part of leadership to me is being able to deliver bad news, but in a truthful way. And obviously, it's easy to tell the truth when it's good news or something positive. to say.
Hmm. Okay.
When it comes to leadership with the family, to me, it's all the heart of love. If you love your children, love your spouse, you try at all times to do what would be in the best interest of the family, best interest of the individual. One of the things I learned from the Navy that you don't see very often is praise in public, reprimand in private. But it's a very effective way to handle subordinates and in a leadership position. If you have something negative to say or something corrective, make it private and use public for glowing praise. So praise in public, reprimand in private.
Nice. Good thoughts. Excellent principles on leadership. I tell you what, that's maybe that is a book you should write. You're off to a good start with that one. I would read that for sure. All right, I'm getting the thumbs up. You thinking about it?
Yes.
All right, beautiful. Beautiful. All right. Sir, I love these stories. I can't wait to read the book myself. And I love that you did it all for your grandkids the way you did it. And I mean, you've lived one incredible life. And I think it's neat that you're not done yet. I mean, you've got more to come. There's a movie in the future, hopefully. And I can't wait to have you back on here. It's been amazing.
I like that, Murray.
Yeah, I would like that very much. The book will have the links in the show notes to make sure that everybody knows how to find the book for you. Let me ask you this, just last question, as we kind of wrap things up here. Is there anything you've unpacked so much, sir, and I appreciate it greatly, and you've shared a ton. Is there anything I didn't ask you? Is there anything that maybe we talked about you want to like drive home, and remind everybody about, or maybe even one last little piece of advice on anything having to do with your career or on being a father or a grandfather, anything that you want to just throw out to the folks as some parting words.
Wow, I'm not usually at a loss of words. But
Well,
what we didn't get into really was the soul searching part, soul searching on the way to Mars.
hmm,
As it turns out, I could have sold my soul to go on the astronaut program and still would not be on Mars.
right.
Just this week, um, SpaceX, third time in a row now, the big rocket is blown up. So it's a tough ask to send a crew to Mars and to live for very long. In my whole life, we've been about 10 years away from launching to Mars, and we're still 10 years away the way it looks. And I wouldn't want to live there.
Okay. I mean, that's some good parting words. Don't go to Mars. I like that very much, very much. But yeah, the soul searching part of it had to be tough. I mean, you've been through a lot in your life.
Yeah, followed the astronaut track. I got the top assignment in the world for a test pilot. I was going to be the test pilot in F-18 Hornet, brand new, first test pilot. And if I was going to test its ability to land on aircraft carriers, yay. If it was to test its ability to do dogfighting with another airplane, that'd be great. Even if it was testing it to just drop conventional dumb bombs, it would be fine. But they were asking me to test its ability and design the program to use weapons of mass destruction,
Hmm.
nuclear, biological, chemical weapons. And I would not have that on my resume. And when I turned down that assignment, arguably the top fighter pilot, top test pilot assignment in the entire world, I turned it down. They figured I must be insane. So they sent me to Bethesda Naval Naval Hospital to be examined, to see whether or not I was sane.
Wow.
So the implication was, as long as you're okay with killing millions of people with these weapons of mass destruction, you're sane. But to question it just is insane.
Yeah.
So the last couple of chapters of the book talk about how the establishment dealt with it and how I dealt with it.
Wow. That's what you alluded to earlier when you said you had a moral dilemma that you weren't sure, how
Yes.
you're going to get through it. I see. I'm really glad I asked you that question. We came back to that. I really am. I'm glad you got a
Well,
chance to say that.
yes.
Yeah. All right. Sir, as we wrap up, I cannot thank you enough, for everything that you've done, obviously, for our country and for your family, and to come on here today and share everything the way that you have, put it into a book. You're still serving the public, by putting these things out there with lessons, talking about leadership and coming on here today. I cannot thank you enough for your service, but I'm going to at least try and just say, thank you. I appreciate you very much. Thanks for being on today.
I'm honored to be on your show, as well as honored to have the opportunities that I did. And thank you for doing what you do.
Thank you. Means a lot coming from you. I appreciate that.
Take
Uh,
care. Hope to
folks,
see you again when the movies comes out.
oh, you're a standing invite. Absolutely. I cannot wait. Folks, Navy veteran, author, father, grandfather, adventurer, all around leader. Been an honor. And Jerry Werner, thank you so much for coming on the program. Been amazing, sir.
Rory, thank you very much for having me.
You
Take
got
care.
it.
Good luck to you and everybody.
Thank you. Folks, this has been another fantastic episode of the Power Man Podcast. The reason that we bring you these powerful men with these powerful messages and stories and things like that is because we support you 100% in your mission to become a better father, a better husband, to become a better provider, a better protector, a better leader in your own family. Folks, the reason we want this for you is because you have value. Yeah, we want it for you because you're worth it. And at some point, we hope that you find a way to believe it. Until next time.